So let's begin our first video with one of the questions from Chapter 1 Business Studies of Standard 11 CBSE. The name of the chapter is Business, Trade and Commerce. And we will deal with one of the questions which would essentially be quite difficult for quite a lot of you to remember, to memorize, or for the matter to construct the answer, because if you look at the CBSE textbook, the details given with respect to the characteristics of business activities is much more detailed, and it's somewhat difficult for you, or for that matter anyone, to really capture the essence of the question from the very detailed description that is given in the textbook. So what we've done is we've tried to simplify the answer for you, and at the same time use certain techniques which will help you to kind of memorize the answer, and at the same time you'll in fact probably by the end of this video remember the answer thoroughly. So the question is, what are the characteristics of business activities? After having gone through the textbook, the CBSE textbook in detail, this is how we have framed the answer, and in a manner so that it's easier for you to comprehend all the points that you are going to write. And at the same time, there's an abbreviation that you see on the top in red font, which is ECAPS, DIGS and MOPRE. So these are abbreviations of the points that we should be mentioning while writing the answer, and by just mentioning these points, remembering and mentioning these points in your answer sheet will fetch you adequate marks, because the examiner would know that you've fairly understood the essence of the question. But at the same time, as we go forward on this particular video, you will also know how you'd be able to elaborate on each of these points, which you should be able to do on your own as well once you understand some of the key points of this particular answer. So what are the characteristics of business? The first point that we should be highlighting is that it's an economic activity, which means that what does an economic activity mean? Economy essentially deals with money. So an economic activity means there is any activity which involves money. So a natural second sentence of this particular point would be that any kind of emotional or affectionate involvement cannot be termed as an economic activity. So a business in whatever shape and form, either small or big, has to have involvement of money in some form or the other. So that will frame the first point of the answer. And if you look at the textbook, the points are fairly segregated and not arranged in a more logical format. What we've done is that we've tried to actually put that in a more logical format. So a more logical extension of point number 1, which is a business is an economic activity, is point number 1A, which is it deals with production of goods and services. So so the heading of the point would be producing goods and services. Now let's elaborate that. Any business or a businessman, as you know, has to add value in the process of carrying out business. So let's say if the business at the corner of your house is a small businessman is trying to sell samosas, all he has to probably make the samosas with a lot of other stuff. He has to use aloo, he has to use maida, and then make the samosas. So what is he doing in the whole process? He's trying to add value in the process. So producing goods and services means adding value in the process of producing that final product. So any business or a businessman adds value in the process of carrying out business. And the second natural point is explaining the word adding value, the term adding value. It is either converting raw materials into useful goods for customers. So a small example given there is cocoa powder to chocolates. You can give any example from your life or whatever comes to your mind from your surroundings. So that is one of the definitions of adding value, or simply offering services. So while we are talking about goods, we should not be actually missing out the term services, because there are services being offered as well. For example, the Swiggy guy comes and delivers food at your place, so that's a service, that's not a good, right? So offering services to satisfy the needs of the customer. So in your locality there could be a barber. The barber is actually providing a service to you. Or there could be a bank. You actually walk into a bank to to avail all kinds of banking services. So in essence, this particular extension of the first point, which is business activity is an economic activity, the first natural extension of this point is that an economic activity means producing goods and services. And now I'm sure you'd be able to elaborate what producing goods and services means. The second natural extension of the point is that selling of goods and services. So while you're producing the goods and services, it's just not producing and keeping it with you. You have to also sell the goods and services. So there has to be an involvement of a buyer and a seller. So the natural elaboration of this point is that there is an involvement of two parties, buyer, seller, on both the sides. And so when the buyer and the seller is there is some sort of an exchange which is taking place, and that is called the passing of the ownership of the good for money, or providing services for a consideration. I have used the term consideration here. You can just to avoid monotony, just to avoid the repetition of the word money, but you can still be using money there. The next logical point, and that's one of the main points again, is dealing in goods and services. So while in the earlier point we've seen that we are essentially talking about producing and selling of goods and services, we can summarize both of those points together to say that the businessman is dealing in goods and services. So the purpose of business is just not to have a single transaction. So how do you really explain this particular point? It means that the businessman is just not doing one single transaction. You could be selling off your old books of your previous class. Does that mean business? It doesn't. But then let's say if you're actually in the business of selling books, or for that matter you have a library at your house and you lend books to your friends for a small fee, that obviously is a business. So the purpose of business is just not a single transaction, but it's a continuous engagement. It's a continuous involvement in the process of buying and selling. So what does that mean? A natural thought which would come to you is that if the businessman is continuously involved in an activity, that becomes his or her bread and butter. So a business should be a businessman's livelihood. You either use the word livelihood or you say bread and butter. I'm sure you will have better ways to kind of elaborate this point as well. What is important is that the main points that we are highlighting, they should be captured in your answer, and that should in any ways give you enough ideas to frame the answer in much more detail. The third abbreviation that we've made of this particular answer is MOPRI, and if I were to kind of break that up, it would actually form the third point and the sub-points of that. The third point is that what is the objective of the business? The main objective is to earn profits. So MOP. So main objective to earn profits. So why does one actually carry out business? One does not carry out business just to do some sort of a charity. The main purpose is to earn money and is to earn profits. So profit is an important part of business. And why does one need to earn profit? Because one would, if one earns profit, then only one is motivated to do more business and expand the business and make more money. So these are the two primary points to elaborate against the main point, which is main objective of earning profits. So earning profits and with the profits to grow the business. Now, when we are actually talking about profit, there are two other elements which come into being, and while the CBSE textbook has captured these points separately, just for the sake of remembering the points and most logically arranging these points, what we've done is that we've made sub points of this particular point and made it into 3A and 3B. 3A being the risk that is involved. So there is an element of risk, obviously, when a businessman carries out a business. You've experienced a lot of it during the COVID period. A lot of businesses were shut for a very long period and businesses were suffering. Some of the businesses also closed down. So what do you call that? A risk. A risk is an uncertain event which renders the business or renders the businessman totally in a way. What we can say is that the businessman is not in a position to carry out business because of the risks that are associated with the business, or earns lesser profit or goes into losses. So profits and losses. So any business has risks that can lead to losses or even closure of the business, as we've seen during the COVID period. So risks are events that can hamper the smooth functioning of the business activities. That's a very natural point when you say that, business can run into losses or even closure. So what does that mean? That, slowly and gradually the business stops functioning properly. And the most logical way of explaining that is that it hampers the smooth functioning of the business activities. Now, the businessman takes the risk of running a business smoothly by tackling the risks of different types, thereby making profits. So what are profits then? In the earlier point, we mentioned that the main objective is to make profit. Why do we say profit? You've bought something for 10 rupees and you've sold it for 10 rupees. You've taken the risk of finding that particular good and then finding a seller for it and selling it. And then if you don't make a profit, that does not mean business at all. So you have to make a profit. So the business takes the risk of, essentially the businessman takes the risk of running a business smoothly by tackling the risks. So all the risks that the businessman encounters, he is constantly trying to, tackle the risk, and the reward for that particular risk is the profit that he makes. And the other term for profit is the return. So that's the logical extension of point number 3, which is 3B, returns. But at the same time, does the businessman make steady returns? Does he make the same amount of profit every time? May not be, because then if the risk is high, the profits are low. If there was a COVID, if there was a prolonged COVID period, a good business would have earned less profit. But once the COVID fear has receded, the businesses are back in full gear and they're making more profit. So returns are not steady. So why are they not steady? Because the risks are not steady. Risks are uncertain. COVID happened for a brief period, and that was a very big risk. So businesses floundered during that period. But the whole purpose of stating risks is that it is uncertain and it cannot be predicted. So if risks cannot be predicted, so if risks happen at different points of time and different types of risks happen, then the businessman's profit also tends to fluctuate. So that's the reason businessman's profits are also uncertain and tend to fluctuate. So the businessman, so the natural point is, any good businessman who is able to predict the uncertain events, the risks, can avoid the losses, or for that matter, closure of business. So a good businessman is the guy who will actually be in a position to predict any kind of risks that he might encounter in the future and take necessary steps to tide over those kind of risks, so that he can continue to grow the business, continue to make profits. So essentially that completes the answer. So let me just summarize how we've abbreviated this particular answer for you in points. So it's ECAPS, DIGS, MOPRE. If we break that up, ECA would mean economic activity, P would mean production of goods and services, S would mean selling of goods and services, DIGS would mean dealing in goods and services, MOP would mean motive of profit, and RE, or anything that sounds like RE, is risk is involved and returns are uncertain. So risk, returns. So that would complete your answer in terms of the points that you have to write for this particular question. You also have an abbreviation before you, so that just by looking at the abbreviation you should be quickly able to kind of write down the points. And once you have the points, I've given you enough ideas to how you should be actually elaborating the points. So isn't it simple? And let me tell you, kids, I mean, this is just one of the questions that we've done so far. So there are various ways to actually remember answers. There are different types of questions which have to be dealt in a different way. You can't possibly be making points of all the answers, but then most of the answers you should actually try and convert, make points out of those, so that it's easier to remember. And at the same time, when you're highlighting the points, it's easier for the examiner to look at those points and immediately know, okay, this student has really studied the chapter very well, has really understood the answer pretty well. So it's always important that wherever you can, you should try and frame points. And there obviously these bigger answers, it's very difficult to remember all the points, because eventually you're going to remember, or you are going to have to remember a lot of questions, many answers. So another way to kind of summarize each of those points is to create abbreviations, which once you go through those abbreviations a few times, it's etched in your minds, and you can very easily frame the answer in your at the time of your exams. So we will conclude this particular video with this particular answer, and I hope this should give you enough ideas to work on these big answers that you are studying for your examinations. I'd be happy to kind of get more ideas from you. So please do send me a mail, subscribe to this particular channel, and give me ideas about the type of questions that you want me to work on. I'd be happy to kind of work on those questions and help you with easier ways to kind of frame the answers and at the same time memorize the answers. Thank you very much. Bye.